Watermelon Sugar, which at this point is out, and you performed on SNL, and everyone's kind of figured out what it's about. The joys of, mutually appreciated oral pleasure.
Is that what it's about?
Is it?
I don't know.
That's what everyone's saying.
Oh.
Always
Crazy.
good to leave it open to interpretation.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
But it's something that just seems to kind of have followed you around, that idea of you not just being a sex symbol, but that a lot of your music is inspired by this.
It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I reckon. But I actually wanted to ask you a genuinely serious question about that, because people throw it around like it's fodder, but it is actually awkward, right? Like, how do you feel sometimes when people seem very focused on you in that light?
In all honesty, I'd say I try and think about it as little as possible, because it's a very strange, dynamic thing. It's also like a weird thing to think of about yourself.
Totally.
Like, I guess the thing with like sex in general is like, it used to feel so much more taboo for me to even like when we're in the band, like the thought of people thinking that I had sex was like, oh no, that's crazy. Like, what if they know? But it's like,
Yeah.
So even just like coming into this record, I wanted to feel a little less like guarded with stuff. I wanted to feel a lot freer and just more joyful and like honest. And I think a lot of the time with like, when there's like tabloid stuff, for example, of like people breaking up and, it's like, I think people forget that there's like a person who's also broken up with someone, which is sad. Like,
Yeah.
You get sad when you break up with someone.
Yeah. It feels to me, this album in part, and excuse me if I'm being too personal, but based on the music, it feels like a breakup record in some respects. And it's one particular song, like, it's a song called Cherry, which is crazy. I mean, cutting right to it, with some real imagery of losing someone to someone else, and there still being that remnant of your relationship moving into a new space, which is right at the core of heartbreak. I mean, that's like one of the most devastating images. If you're lucky enough to get your heart broken, that's one of the most devastating images you can go through. And you're also quite specific, in terms of, it feels to me like it's quite specific in referencing the relationship you've been in.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's a weird one for me because I'm always like, I don't like to kind of explain songs or like kind of explain the meaning behind them and stuff like that. But I think with this record, it's so much more open.
Yeah.
That it's like, but you've told us in the,
Yeah.
like it tells you what it is, I think a thing that I like about kind of definitely where this record went, especially compared to the last one, is like when I start making an album, I don't feel like, oh, I'm making an album that I'm going to put out in December of next year. Or it feels like I just start writing some songs and then I can be as honest as possible. And then the time when you get to decide if you think it's too honest is when you're putting it out. And I never want to like trim that stuff down.
So you never thought for 1 second when you listen back to Cherry later on that we'd be having a conversation or other people would be listening to it, trying to decipher it and how that would make you feel? You felt you wanted to be true to it?
I think I wanted to be true to it. I think the moment that I wrote it, I wanted to be true to the moment that I wrote it and how I was feeling then. And the thing with...
How are you feeling then?
Not great. But I think also in the moment I felt like I was realizing some stuff about, it was all part of like being more open and, not being like, I don't care. It's like, no, like you get petty when something's not going the way that you want. Like you get petty with that stuff. And I think there's something with Cherry where it's like, it's so pathetic, kind of, in a way. The night that I wrote it, we'd been writing for a few weeks and everyone had left the studio. It was me, Tyler, and Sammy, who's our engineer. And we were kind of sitting around talking at like 2 a.m. maybe. And I was saying that I was feeling a lot of pressure because the last record wasn't like a radio record, I felt like a lot of pressure to be making these like big songs. And I was like, I feel like this record has to be really big. So I feel like I need to make certain songs. You know, I have all these ideas about records that I want to make, and I want to make this record in 5 years, I want to make this record in 10 years, and I want to make like just these ideas for records that I want to make. And we had this conversation, and Tyler just said to me, you just have to make the record that you want to make right now. That's it. There's no like, let me make sure this one's a commercial success so that I can make what I want later down the road. You just have to make the record that you want to make right now.
He's right.
So then we stayed up and wrote Cherry that night. So
you felt bad when you wrote it. How'd you feel when you finished it?
So good. Like I loved it so much.
It's an amazing song.
It.
Who's speaking at the end? What's the vocal at the end that cuts
That
in?
was my ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, so that's interesting, and I think it's super cool that you left that in, obviously, from a sort of imagery point of view, because I love all that stuff. I love hearing things that revolve around music and not necessarily just tied to a structure. But the decision to keep, you know, your ex-girlfriend speaking at the end of the song is like so blunt and so straight up. Like, what the f was going through your mind? Like, anyone else who's just broken up with someone right now is like, not on your wildest day would I do that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know, I think it was like, because it got added in later on and it felt so part of the song. It just felt like it needed it. We're friends and stuff, so I asked her if it was okay, and she was okay with it. And,
what did she think of the song?
I think she liked it.
Come on, man, it's written about it, right? You gotta love that at the end of the day, man. I mean, there's a song called Falling on the record, which the first time I heard it was like everyone was just floored, and it's a real standout, and it's gonna become something I think that people will carry with them irrespective of the context of the album. They'll zero in on that song as well in its own way. And Tom was telling me that came super fast.
I was going out for dinner, I think, and I was getting picked up from Tom's house. So he came to pick me up, and I was showering, and he was like playing on the piano. And as I came out of the shower, he was playing like the dun 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 dun. I went and stood next to him at the piano, just in a towel, and we just kind of wrote the whole thing. So it was really fast.
How long did it take?
I'd say Falling maybe took like probably 20 minutes.
What? I mean, that's 20 minutes in a towel. That's real friendship.
Yeah.
That's
right.
About 3 days.
He's like, okay, we finished it. Please go put some trousers on.
Put some pants on his own. Yeah. That's one of those moments, right, where the surfing analogy, where the wave and the practice all comes together. Where do you think that came from, the subject matter, if it came so quick? What do you think you were saying in that song, listening back to it now?
I think it was like, for me, what I hadn't really experienced before was during the making of this record, the times when I felt good and I felt happy were like the happiest I've ever felt in my life. And the times when I felt sad was like the lowest I ever felt in my life. And I think it was kind of that feeling of when you can feel yourself kind of falling back into one of those moments where you're there. And the chorus says like, what am I now? Am I someone I don't want around? It was kind of like...
Yeah, it's powerful. It's super self-absorbed and self-indulgent in a sort of like self-hating kind of way.
Kind of. I guess it was a big moment where I was kind of asking myself like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? Yeah. Kind of.
And there's imagery in there of being too drunk and wandering hands and all that stuff, that all the guilt points along the way.
Like, I kind of started to feel like threads of, you know, where I could see myself becoming someone that I didn't want to be. And that was really hard. But I think that the thing that's nice with that is you get to write a song about it and be like, okay,
next.
You know.
And who helps you at those moments? Does your mum still play a really important role? Your family? And by the way, you don't have to be you.
Right.
There are people doing all kinds of things in all walks of life who are losing their way and need people to bring them back into line. So let's just talk about that relationship for a second, because I know family's a big thing for you.
I'm so lucky with my family. They've always just been really supportive, and that's it's kind of all you can ask for with like doing this. Is obviously, you know, sometimes you don't want to go home and be like, I'm miserable right now, because you want to be like, no, I'm fine, don't worry about me. And that happens too, but also have the relationship with my family where if I need to have that conversation, I can.
What's the best bit of advice your mum's given you?
The thing with my mum is she's less of like a soundbite of advice. She's like the kindest woman I know, you know? So for me, it's always been like just watching her, how she is with people and stuff is like, I just don't think she has like a bad bone, which is an incredible thing to grow up around. To have that person like supporting you is, it's amazing. She's the best. She's like actually the best. So.
Who do you miss the most? Who do you wish was still around?
Probably my stepdad. Stepdad passed away a couple of years ago.
That's tough.
He was pretty great. He was like a pretty great guy.
Yeah. And what have you learned sort of going through life now as you're kind of experiencing loss? Because we all have to cross that bridge, and
Yeah.
that's kind of sobering. And then that's when adulthood's really knocking on your door and you start to really take advantage of and reprioritize things. And, you know, coming out the other end of that really, really high octane, visceral childhood that you had into your 20s and getting into your second album and being an independent human being who's got a strong relationship with your family, like, how have your priorities shifted and what are the things that really come into focus for you now?
Friendships are probably just the most important thing to me. Like the people who I'm really close with are just, I'd say, way more important to me than anything else. I've definitely felt a difference in the conversations that I have with friends. I guess since you like experience death more. When you're a kid and you lose a grandparent or something,
Yeah.
and it's really sad, but also it's like, oh, grandparents are the people who die first.
There's some natural order to that.
Yeah, and I think like the first time you lose like a friend is when you really feel like an adult. You're kind of like, wow.
It's because it's one of the first experiences you have, I think, where you lose control, completely lose control.
You know, I think you have those moments where, and every single person does it who's ever lost a friend, where, you know, whether you're close to them or not, I think everyone has that thing of like, I wish I'd just asked one more time if they were okay, you know? And if there's any positive thing that could possibly come out of that, it's that now the conversations that I have with friends about that stuff is way different in terms of like, you know, you ask a friend if they're okay and it's like, yeah, I'm good. And you're like, I'm like more prepared to have that like, no, but, you know,
Give me the real stuff.
actually okay.
Give me the real stuff.
You know, and that's like their conversations that I have with my friends now.
And you're equally vulnerable in your
used to
own
do
way.
that before.
And you're able to give
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a really important thing. And that obviously, like I said earlier, is where like real friendship comes from. And I don't think everyone's lucky enough to have it, and I don't think it happens all the time.
So interesting that, you know, you came out of this experience, which has left so many people isolated and fearful and paranoid and not wanting to connect with human spirit because they've had non-stop human spirit surrounding them for years, right? And you're like so different. It's like you just kind of called time on it and then just went searching for real human experience almost immediately. You know, you came to California in the search for people and for experience and for relationships.
I mean, the thing with my relationship with California is like, it's also definitely changed over the last few years, but when I first came here, it was like, oh, if you get to move here, it means you've made it. Like, you did good.
I mean,
you know?
to be fair.
Yeah, but this isn't my house. but you know, you get this like, it's everywhere you've seen in movies and you're kind of like, oh, it's amazing. Like, you're in the mix and you get to be here. And I think the more time I spent here, I was like, oh no, actually if you can come here and then leave is when you feel really great. If you're like, oh yeah, that's amazing.
See you in 2 months.
See you in a bit, yeah.
But that just goes back to what you were saying about, you strike me as being someone who's just restless.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with here is like, I've never felt at home here in LA, which is, you know, in one sense, not great, but at the same time, I always feel like I'm on holiday when I'm here.
Yeah, it's fair.
So I really enjoy being here. A lot of my closest friends are here, which is where I usually feel the best, is when I can see those people.
So as this conversation comes to a natural end, as the sun goes down on our time together, what is London to you then, if that's the closest thing to home?
London's like just where I'll want to be at some point. And it's a weird one because after traveling so much, I don't look at the future as like, I'm going to live in this one place and then I'll never move anywhere. I think it's just about like being happy. I just want to be happy. And
are you?
I feel pretty good right now. Yeah.
You had fun making this album?
Yeah, so much fun.
What's the most fun memory of making this album?
I'd say probably my favorite memory from making this, one of at least, was the day we wrote Golden. We stopped and went to have dinner, and we were all sat in the kitchen at Shangri-La. And we kind of just played it like on one guitar, and everyone kind of singing it around the table. And it just felt really good. Like, it felt so much more joyous than last time. And I think that makes sense because, like you said, the first single was a 7-minute piano ballad. So, like, it would have been weird to come out being really joyous. But
You keep going.
oh yeah,
Yeah, just keep going.
okay, great. And I think part of the thing with like the mushrooms thing for me is that I never do anything when I'm working. And I don't even drink when I'm working. If I'm touring or anything, I don't drink really at all. And when I was in the band, it was like, to me, it felt like it was so much bigger than any of us.
Yeah.
That I kind of felt like I'm not going to be the one who fucks it up. So I was like, now is the time in my life when you probably go out and experiment and do this and you take this and you do that.
Because it's on your shoulders.
And that's what you do with your friends. And I was like, I'm not going to be the guy who messes it up. So I was like, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Making this record felt like, I just felt so much more joyous. And I was with my friends and we were in Malibu.
Safe.
And it was like, yeah, I felt so safe. It was like, I want to take some mushrooms, I'm going to take some, like, now's the time to have fun. Like, we're in Malibu, 24. I'm also in music. I'm not like, do you know, it's like, you know, it's like I'm not.
You wouldn't be the first musician to
like
experiment in that environment.
I'm not like a politician. I don't think it's that crazy.
I don't think it's that crazy. It's definitely not crazy. What is the, do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I think my thing with drugs is like, if you're taking anything to escape but to try and hide from stuff, then you shouldn't even drink. And if you're taking anything to like have fun and be creative, then great. And I was with my friends, and making an album, you obviously get so in your head and you get so like self-conscious about everything, and you hit these bumps in the road where you're kind of thinking, is this good enough? And is it this enough? Is it that enough? There's like an afterflow of some of that stuff where sometimes you take something and then for 10 days after you're like, don't worry about it. Everything's gonna be fine. Like it's like kind of stress relieving in
Totally.
in a sense.
And that's where you're at now, I guess, in your life as you redefined success and you had fun making this album, is that you're just trying to worry less?
I think so, yeah. I think that's like been a big part of this whole thing for me. Is like, I'm just trying to go through life being a little less worried about stuff. Definitely with like working, because ultimately it'll be okay. It's like, if you don't hit the top of the chart, your life doesn't change. Like, I think realizing that, it's like, if that was what I was aiming at and then it didn't happen, then I'd feel so much worse. But redefining it for me has been amazing to be like, oh, but that's not the game I'm playing.
You did it.
There's a freedom with that. And
you know, you don't get to go out on arena tours with Jenny Lewis if you're trying to play the game, you know.
she's so sick.
She's the best. You don't take Casey Musgraves out before she won the Grammy if you're trying to, like, these are bold moves. It's obvious how talented Casey and Jenny are, but you would be making a far more methodical, chart-based decision, you know, taking someone else out that would fill a different kind of void, you know what I mean, in the night?
Yeah.
Whereas it just strikes me that you're making decisions based on what's making you happy.
Especially with that stuff, because Casey, I just love her. Her coming on tour I was more thinking of like, who do I want to watch every night for like 30 shows?
Yeah.
You know?
And you were so dialed in. The timing was unbelievable because that album is so special.
Yeah.
And then eventually it's like the whole world works it out.
She was booked before the album came out.
Which is nuts.
Because I just think she's so good.
Unbelievable. Her
and
voice.
I just want to watch people who are inspiring, and you just want to be around like good stuff. I'm just a massive fan of hers. So when she came out, it was really cool for me that she was coming.
She
and then
loved it as
obviously
well.
the new album came out and it was like, this is amazing. You know, same with, I mean, Leon came out last time.
And you got KP coming out in the UK.
Yeah, she's coming out this time.
Jenny Lewis coming out in the US. It's all dialed in, man. And this album is really, it's an amazing listen from beginning to end. Covers a lot of different ground, really revealing and in a really beautifully written, some amazing lyrics in there that really kind of, I haven't heard people put into context before. Songs like Falling, and, you know, we talked about Cherry and Fine Line and more mellow moments, but also, you know, even talking about, you know, the Canyon song where, you know, you're just putting into you know, the idea of reflecting and reminiscing on a time when it was simple. And it's just really great, man, from beginning to end.
Thank you.
It's been good to connect and talk to you for the first time. Appreciate it.
It was fun.
What are you going to do for the Christmas break? I mean, you don't start in earnest till next year, right?
I'll be doing something, sure, probably. Christmas, I go home, I go to my mum's.
Yeah. Are you ready for next year, though? I mean, do you feel charged up about the touring and everything else?
I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be, it's my favorite part.
Really? Even more than...
I mean, I've completely fallen in love with being in the studio now because of like the freedom that comes with it. And I think also now I'm kind of learning a different way of doing it. I think I'd get like chunks in the studio. I'd book like a studio for 2 months and then I'd go and I'd be in there every day because I felt like I'd kind of be like, well, we've booked it, so we have to be in there. And I think at some point, you've written everything that you have to write in the moment, and you realize you're not actually living because you've just been in the studio for 3 months. So I'm kind of working out still the balance of like, next time maybe I'll go in the studio for a couple weeks at a time while continuing to just kind of live.
Are you going to act again?
Yeah.
Anything on the
I'd
horizon?
like to. I think for me, it's like with the acting thing, like I never wanted to do it as like, just doing it to like take a job. There was something about like the Dunkirk thing where when I heard about it, I was like, I want to be involved in that so bad. I just remember the way that it kind of hit me and where I was excited to watch it, like whether I was in it or not. I was like, I can't wait to see that. And, you know, if you get to make stuff that you're passionate about and you get to make something that makes you happy, then you're happy and no one can call you unsuccessful, which is great.
That's the redefinition of success, my man. Thanks for your time, bro.
Thank you.